Hello and welcome everyone to FeverBee's World-Class Member Experience webinar. One of the things that we've seen for the last, maybe the last 5 years or so, is that organization after organization are spending tens, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars on their community technology. But when it comes to actually designing that technology, when it comes to actually building the perfect home to get members engaging and interacting with one another, to perform the very behaviors that the entire community is designed to make them perform, we often do a really bad job. And so what I want to do today is go through a lot of the community platforms that are out there, go through a lot of the examples of best practices and perhaps opportunities where communities can be improved, and pull together some common themes that will hopefully guide you to develop and make your community a lot better than it is today. A quick word of warning for you: if your community is on Facebook, if your community is on Slack, if it's on maybe Mighty Networks and a few of the other platforms where you can't quite change a lot of the options, then you might not be able to get as much value from this community as you might do from some of the other work we've done. But I still think there's going to be a lot of very common principles that are going to help you here. So I'm going to try and take you through all of these things and try and provide you with some very low-hanging fruit, some easy, quick optimizations that you can make at the moment. A very quick background on who I am. I'm the founder of FeverBee, the author of Buzzing Communities, and the indispensable community as well. If you're interested in the books, Buzzing Communities is a book that will hopefully help you get a community up from scratch, drive high levels of engagement, and it's good if you're just getting started in this industry. If you've been around a while, then you might want to think about how you get the most value from that community, how you build a community that delivers the absolute best possible impact for both your organization and your members. So the indispensable community is probably a better fit in that situation. What we've been doing over the last 11 or 12 years now is working with all organizations from all sectors, from the public sector, from the private sector, from different nations around the world. It's been an amazing to work with so many great brands. But what we've been doing is helping them increase their level of participation, helping them get more people participating in that community, helping them deliver a better return on investment from their community. And I think what we've got a very good track record of doing is delivering results. We feel we can go into almost any online community now and optimize that. And that usually comes in one of two forms. The first form is by helping these organizations and these community professionals better understand the psychology behind why people participate. The second side of this is helping them design their community platform a lot better than what it is at the moment. Often there's very simple mistakes that people make, and we can do a lot better job of improving there. And the really crazy thing to me is that when you consider the amount of time and money that we invest in community platforms at the moment, that we spend so little time researching how to design the best possible member experience. So if we look at the different tiers of platforms that most of you that are watching this today are probably on, you can see that there's a whole wide range, but it's still, no matter what platform you're using, it's probably still a significant percentage of your budget. At the low end with Mighty Networks, open source forums, you're probably looking at anything from 500 to 10 grand a year, depending upon the number of visits you have. And then implementation time, maybe around up to 4 weeks, or that can be significantly longer if you're doing a big migration. At the medium tier with vanilla, discourse, higher logic, you're probably looking at something around 10 to 50,000 a year, and then an even longer implementation time. And I'm sure some of them will dispute that figure with me. And then at the high end, when you're looking at Lithium or Chorus as it's called now, Salesforce inside it, and Intelligent maybe as well, you're looking at anything ranging from $50,000 to $5 million a year. That's just for the platform itself, and a huge implementation time. So you might imagine, given all this time and resources and energy that a platform sucks up, that every platform would be really well designed. And the truth is they're not. The truth is most are poorly designed, not in terms of just how they look or how they function, but in the experience they're trying to create for their members, in getting members to perform the behaviors that they need to perform. And very often they repeat the same few mistakes. We see this in community after community. If we look at the Kronos community here, this is the very first page that you see. This is the home page you see. And not only is it relatively ugly, It's got a huge video that very few people in the community actually watch that takes up most of the space. If you were to visit this community, it doesn't immediately draw you in to participate and engage and feel a sense of community with other customers. It's not doing the job I feel it's supposed to do. If you look at Element 14 here, Element 14 are one of my favorite online communities with one of my least favorite websites at the moment. Again, you can see it might be a highly active community, but it's kind of ugly. It doesn't function the way it's supposed to function. It's on, I think, an old version of Jive, and so it's a huge opportunity to improve it here. Or if we look at Zora, I think I'm saying that right. If we look at the Zora online community, it doesn't look horrifically bad, but what you notice right at the top, they have this huge banner and this really tiny search box where you can find the information you want. And that's the entire reason why people are coming to the community. They are hiding the bulk of the activity below the fold in the page. And that's not what we want to be doing. Your homepage, especially the top of the homepage, is the most valuable real estate for any online community. And perhaps ironically, Zora are wasting that with pictures of real estate. So we want to do a much better job here. Or if we look at the Cengage online community here, what do we notice here? They have a platform that looks generally okay, but when they launch this, if you were to try to sign into this, do you know what happens? If you were to try and sign into this community, because of the single sign-on, it takes you away from that community and it becomes very difficult to find your way back. And this happens again and again and again. So let's begin with some basic processes behind a successful community platform. What we've been doing in so much of our work over the past few years is putting together some standards in place so we can benchmark things that are quite subjective into a place where we can say, okay, this is how it's going now, and this is what you need to work on next. So our standards generally look like this. This doesn't include every single thing, but when we look at a community website, when we want to know if it's well designed or not, these are the levels that we tend to look at. We look at things like the navigation. We look at things like the design. We look at things like the personalization and the level of activity and the mobile options for participating, and then the calls to action as well. And each one of these has multiple levels. If you're watching this video from the main website, what I'll do is put the link to this below so then you can see and you can benchmark your own community. But you should be able to clearly see here where your community is at in each one of these, and then you can see where to go next. Very often, if you just launched a new community, it doesn't make sense for you to be at level 3 or 4 here, but you can think about, okay, how do we move to the next level? This is what's going to be on your roadmap for the next month or the next year, and this is where we want to be at. So let's go through some great examples of this and occasionally some not so great examples. I've already done this webinar once with CMX and I use good examples and bad examples. If I feature your community as a bad example, I apologize, but do try to see it as an opportunity to improve. Because I think every bad community or every bad example I use is a great opportunity to easily improve your community and get much better results. So let's begin with the first question when it comes to navigation. And the first question is this: is the community easy to find? Can the people you want to participate in your community even find that community? So let's go through a bad example. Let's take a look at the Wells Fargo website here. Not many people know, perhaps not surprisingly, that Wells Fargo actually has an online community for its customers. But if you were to look at this website right now, can you guess where that community is? This is the main homepage for Wells Fargo. Can you guess where that community is? You might be able to guess, but it's not clear, is it? First, you have to click on the customer service tab, that tiny tab right at the top of the page. And once you're on there, you get taken to the customer service page. And very quickly, can you see here where the community is? It will take you a few seconds, and it'll take you a few seconds because it's buried all the way down at the very bottom of the page. You have to scroll to the very bottom of the page to find that community. It's squeezed between the contact us and the social care parts of the website. So that's how you find the community. And that means very few people are going to stumble across that community in its current form. This is not where we want to be at. Very often we spend so much time negotiating for more resources and more support for our community instead of just negotiating for the placement of that community on the website. Now let's compare this to a much better example. This is the SAP website. And can you see where the community is here? Ideally, you should be able to see that it's featured twice on the company landing page, the main website of sap.com, with all the other things that they sell, with all the other services they offer, with all the other information they want to provide to their customers. The community is featured twice on the landing page. That is an incredible result. And not only is it featured twice on the landing page, when you hover over the tab at the top of the page, it will take you specifically to where you want to go. It's not just a thing where you can click the tab and it takes you to the community homepage. You can go specifically within that community to where you want to go. If you want to ask a question, you can click specifically on that area. If you want to write a blog post, you can do that. This is probably the best practice. This is probably something a lot of us can aspire towards. And also, for a lot of us, isn't that difficult to do. It's a very quick and a very simple win. So first thing we want to be doing is making sure the community is easy to find. But now let's assume that we've done that. What's the next step? What's the next step when someone has found the community? Well, the next step is to make sure the community is easy to explore. Is your community right now easy to explore? Can members find the things that they actually want to find? Now, I don't want to go too deep into the user experience side, but there are a couple of big things I think we can immediately improve. What we don't want to be doing is hiding the search box. If we look at the Monzo online community in the right-hand side here, you can see if you want to search for something, you have to find that magnifying glass hidden in the way top right of the page to search for the information that you came there to find. Or if you're in the Baby Center community, the search box isn't too far away, but it's kind of hidden amongst all the other things that are appearing on that page. Most people, especially in the brand community side, most people when they visit a community, they're searching for information. So how do we make it easy for them to find that information? Now compare this with the Spotify online community. What do we see here? At the top of the page is a massive box, Ask the Community, and you can search for your information right beneath that. So you can begin typing your question, and as you type that question, you'll see possible answers showing up below. So if you don't find the answer, then you can ask a question directly from that search box. That's a very powerful thing to have. So we usually want a large search box positioned very prominently within the community, at the top of the page, in the main prime real estate of that community. We see this in the Sonos online community as well. I think they're with Insided. Again, we see that large search box at the center of the page, and this is generally best practice. This is generally what for most of us we want to be at. And also remember, just for browsing around the community, there are other factors that matter as well. You can see here how they're showing different content to different members. You can see what appears just below in the featured tips that they have here. But often we don't need to make this too complicated. If we go to the Tesla online community, what we see here is a dead simple way of categorizing the different content that's out there, all of the discussion in a few simple areas. There's no other place for content, there's no other place for anything else. They get members directly to where they want them to go. And for newer communities, this is generally what you want to be doing. Don't be afraid to keep your community quite simple here. But if you do have more activity, if you do have more different types of activity than just the discussions, then you want to be doing something beyond just this. If we look at the Optimize the online community here, what do you notice? Well, you can't quite see it yet, but there's lots of different discussions. They easily go off the page. It's hard to find and follow what you want to have or what you want to see. So it's very hard to browse this page unless they have an easy navigation bar on the left-hand side of the page. This makes it really easy to find everything within just 3 clicks. Within just 3 clicks, you can find everything you want to find. This is a good best practice to make sure any member can find any content in your community within 3 clicks. But I also really like the navigation bar on the left-hand side of this page. I think for a Chorus or Lithium-based community, this is a pretty good best practice to have here. Another community I really like the look of is the Tableau online community. I think they're with Jive, but I could be wrong about that. It might be Lithium now. But what do you notice about this community? It doesn't look particularly amazing. It looks pretty dull by the design standards at the moment, and we'll come to that in a second. What do you notice? Well, first, the navigation is dead simple here. You can search for what you want really easily. If you're new, you know exactly where to go. And then the three main areas of that community that they want people to participate in, the forums, the user groups, the ideas, they're positioned way at the top of the page. And you can even get the weekly digest of new information just below. So it's really easy to browse around and find exactly what you want. They don't just hide it in the navigation bar like many communities do. If you look at the top right, you can see the information is there again, the forums, the ideas, and the user groups. It's way hidden in the top right, but they also know that a lot of members aren't going to visit that. So it's better to put the places they want members to go within that homepage itself, not just within the navigation bar. Another community that does an excellent job of this is the AutoX community. It's not my favorite design. I think they bury a lot of the activity just off the page, but it's really easy just by visiting the homepage here to see everything that's important to that community. See everything that is important to the organization. They have the academy, they have blogs, they have the alternation, they have the culture and events, they have different categories for different kinds of discussions, they have photos, they have use cases, all from that main homepage. And if that's not enough, then again, they have that left-hand side navigation bar. This is a pretty good world-class experience for members. So as a general rule, you want all major areas of your community to be clearly visible from the homepage. You want a large search box and a maximum of 3 clicks deep for all of the content on your page. This is a pretty good standard set of principles to abide by. Next is content ordered by popularity. It blows my mind how often we waste the best real estate in a community with stuff that so few people want to actually read. So a good practice here is like the Tableau community, and you've seen it with a few others already, where they're making it really easy to see what's popular right now or what is going to be most popular to most members. What we know in most communities is around 80% of the discussions are around 20% of the topics. So if you can feature some of those topics in the most prominent place, so members can easily find what they want to see, then you're making a much better experience for your community members at the moment. So we want to be having the most popular areas in the places where members are most likely to see them. Don't categorize things alphabetically. Please stop doing that. Make sure that you're putting the things that are most popular in the most prominent places of your community. We see this also in the Sonos community here. The most popular subjects at the moment, the hashtags that appear right at the top. So you can click on any one of these and go exactly to the areas of your community that are most popular at the moment. And remember too that this is going to change over time. What is popular today might not be what's most popular a week from now. Alexa probably wasn't very popular in this community, say 2 or 3 years ago, but it's very popular at the moment. Another thing that we can fix in most of the communities is put the categories that people see in order by their level. I forgot that when I mentioned my Alexa, it's going to load up the Alexa on my desk. But what we also see is that when the categories are listed here, we can see that they're not in order of their popularity. If we look at these categories at the moment, how to use the Qualtrics communities at the top, networking and job postings are next. Why are these categories here above these more popular categories here? Clearly these are more popular. Clearly these are more important to the members. So why are they not positioned in the place where they will get the most prominence within the community? If you know what's popular, then put the most popular stuff in the most prominent place. Another thing you can do is pin the most popular or useful discussions to the top. If you can't copy what Sonos is doing or Spotify or Tableau are doing, you can still pin discussions to the top of the page that you know most people are going to be interested in. If you know that a certain topic comes up again and again and again, then you can pin that topic to the top of the page to prevent people asking the same question again and again and again. I can do that by each category as well. Most people tend to have the same questions, so it's a good idea to pin these to the top of the page. Another thing you could do is you've got great content that's created by your members. You can do what Airbnb do here and pin those guides that are created by their members within the community as well. Make it really easy for members to explore what they want to find within that community. Anyone can create a guide and tag it, and then it can be featured in this post. So this is a better way of engaging members in that community. So what you can do here is look at the different levels and find out where you're at the moment and what attributes you need to go to the next page. So we've covered levels 1 to 3 generally at the moment. What you can also do with level 4 is make sure that you have sub-menu depth indicators so people know how deep that menu is, and a better navigation experience, and maybe use of labels and hover colors and things that are quite more on the user experience side. But every one of us, I think, should be able to get to level 3. If we have developed a platform that's not on Facebook or a platform that we can customize, I think we should all, at the very least, be able to get to level 3 here. Next, we're going to look at the design side of community. Design is one of those things, like the whole user experience actually, that doesn't get much attention at all. If you read as many blog posts about community as I do, if you go to as many events about community as I do, you know that almost no one talks about community design at all. They talk about gamification or super user programs or something along those lines, but they so rarely talk about design. So let's talk about design here. The first lesson is to get the basics right. The design basics itself. So let's take a look at the Fitbit community here. I quite like the Fitbit community as it is. What do you notice about this community? It's not ugly, but if you look at the very top of the page, the contrast here isn't that great. That text that appears just below tends to contrast with the background, and this happens a lot. If you look at the search box that appears here, it doesn't stand out as well against the thing that's holding up the Fitbits above. So it generally isn't a good practice. And it's a really easy thing to fix. We shouldn't be making these kinds of mistakes in our community. Any designer should be able to spot this. And what we also noticed is that they have this big banner just below that with something new that they've announced. But if you've already seen this, there's no way to minimize it, there's no way to close it, and this isn't a good idea. This is the prime real estate of that community, so we don't want to be wasting it with stuff that people have already seen. Once people have seen the announcement, at the very least, they should be able to minimize that announcement. And this is what we've done for clients in the past. We look at the Eventbrite community, which we worked with them a couple of years ago. What we set up was a banner at the top of the page where once people have seen it, they can minimize that banner, they can hide that announcement. So the whole principle here is that members aren't having to see things they've already seen. So the very basic design level, all of us should be able to take care of with any half-decent designer that's around at the moment. The second big principle, and we've come across this already, is don't waste space. Even the brands of the best online communities, perhaps in the world, from the very biggest brands in the world, continually waste so much space. So let's look at the Apple support community here. I love the Apple community. I think they generally do a terrific job, except for the homepage of that community. What you see, I think, is that it's designed to the same standards as the rest of the Apple website. And the problem with that is that it looks good, it looks clean, but if you were visiting this community every single day, you can't scan the community to find what you want. They waste so much space here. Look, all those images that are featured here, maybe it's possible that a member will visit that image and think, oh, there are images of other members, I'm definitely going to participate here. I think it's more likely they are thinking, oh, now I've got to scroll past all this to get to the stuff I actually wanted to see. If we look at the way that they feature the topics in the community at the moment, they waste so much space between the topics, and it has to be a lot more condensed than this. So many organizations at the moment are wasting so much space, and it simply shouldn't be happening. Another great example is the TomTom community, which is on Inside It, I think. What do you notice about this community? This is the homepage of that community. When you visit this community for the first time, this is what you see. Look how much space these categories do take up. They take up the entire page. No one can see the actual activity that's taking place because the categories have taken up all the space. This is a really badly designed online community. Now let's compare this to, say, the Atlassian community on the right. What do you notice here? Well, on the left, you can see how much space they've taken up with these categories. And there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So at least 7 categories here. And now we look at the Atlassian community. And they've got 10 categories in the same amount of space as it took the TomTom community to display about 1 category. And what they've been able to do because of that is have all the activity, the latest things that are happening in the community, the reason that people are visiting that community below that section. So they can squeeze in a lot more activity in the same amount of space by just being smart about how they display the categories. These images on the left on the TomTom community add nothing to it. It'd be a lot better to display the top posts from each of these categories below than having just all this dead, empty white space here. The Atlassian community is a lot better designed because of this. And this brings us to one of the big principles of what the homepage is for. The homepage is for regulars who want to scan what's new. Most newcomers to a community, at least those that are in an open community, will come via search. And that means they don't land on the homepage. The experience with the homepage is when they sign up possibly to ask a question, but even then they can avoid the homepage entirely. The homepage is for regulars who scan activity to see if there's something that they can participate in right now. And if you're not giving your members something they can participate in right now, then they're not going to participate. So the more they have to scan, the harder it is for them to see what's new in that community, the less likely they are to participate. And one of the biggest wins at the moment is to simply reduce the percentage of the homepage that is static content, which is when members have seen it once, they can do something differently as a result, do something better as a result. If we look at, say, the Nest Online community here, again, this community, it looks good, it's clean, the categories are well positioned, I like the logos, I like the symbols, but it's wasting so much space. So much of this content is static within that community that's going to be very difficult for someone that's new to immediately see all the new things that they can scan and if there's something they can participate in. The same with the Alteryx community here. I love Alteryx, I love what their community does, and I think it's one of the best examples of a community, except for this one thing, which is so much of the homepage is dedicated to sections that aren't going to be updated at all. That is static content within that community, or simply isn't updated frequently enough. This is another problem that happens very often. This is most common when most of the content that appears on the homepage is sourced by the organization. So SAP was an example of this when they relaunched their website. What you see is that a lot of the content that appeared just below the main section of that homepage hasn't been updated in a long time. You've got content here that's a few weeks old, one piece that's a month old, another thing that's been around for a week, another thing that's 2 to 3 weeks old, another thing that's been lingering for a month. All these things just linger. So when someone has seen it once, there's absolutely no reason why they need to be seeing it again. So it doesn't make sense to do this. What we do want to be doing instead is making sure that anything that is appearing on that community homepage, to the best extent possible, is updated as often as possible. So it's a reason for members to visit every single day because there's fresh stuff on that homepage every single day. And I think this also takes us into a discussion of what the different types of homepages are. Because depending upon the type of community you're developing, there are different approaches that you can take. The first one, and maybe the most common one, and perhaps the easiest one for most communities, especially those that are new, is to have a list of discussion titles or snippets of discussions. So if we look at the Unbounce community here, it's dead simple. You can see the top things at the top where people might want to browse around specific content items. You can see a very simple navigation bar below, and then you can see the latest activity on the right-hand side and an easy way of browsing around the community on the left. It doesn't have to be more complicated than this. If your community is new, this is a pretty good way to organize that community. Or if you look at what I think is probably the best designed online community is the Stack Exchange or the Stack Overflow online community. What you see here are so many unique innovations, particularly for that community. It might not look like much, but there's a lot that's going on just under the hood here. We can go through a few of these. We can see the search box is slightly hidden, but not too hard to find. It's generally where you would expect it to be. You can see they're showing the popularity of the questions by the number of votes, the answers, and the views. so people know how popular these things are. The problem with that, however, is that most of the questions do seem quite unpopular because it's updated so frequently that when people visit, they just see a lot of questions that haven't been answered within the last minute. I mean, take a look at the number of questions that are posted and how quickly they are. These, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 or so questions that appear in here have all been asked within the last minute. So it's hard to keep that up to date. They do a good job though of showing the tags for each of these discussions, and remember it's all focused on the latest activity. They do have blogs and news that they want to share, but that is kind of hidden to the right hand side. They have the gamification features as well, but that's a little bit hidden, but it's in the top right so you can see where you're at. They had an easy way where you can add what tags you want to follow as well. This doesn't look too complicated at the moment, but there's an awful lot that's going on under the hood of this right now. So generally, this is a pretty good design for a community. It's not one that's native to any of the platforms at the moment, but it's a pretty good design for a community. The second is where you have on-page discussions like we've just seen, but also better navigation options. So if we look at the Reddit online community, I think we're all familiar with this one. Again, you can see the discussions that are below here, but then it's easy to browse around to what's most popular or what they want people to see at the moment. It's a pretty good way of showing a community. And look what else you notice here as well. There's almost no static content. If you look at the most popular website of anything, of any tool that we use, you'll find that if you load up Reddit or Facebook or Twitter, there's almost no static content on that page. It's simply a community filled with dynamic or the latest updates from members of that community. Perhaps the best example of this is the Tableau community, where again, they have the key things at the top they want people to explore, but then you can see everything that's new, the most recent discussions, most popular content in that community, just below that. You can see the unanswered questions as well, and then you can explore the community a lot better at the very bottom of that page. So again, it's a dead simple win, and something I think all of us can apply to our communities. The third approach is a newsfeed approach. This is what you see in Facebook and other types of communities. Perhaps the best example at the moment is the Sephora community, especially from a community perspective. This has pros and cons. This is great when you want people to talk about the kinds of discussions that people aren't going to search for later on, where people can share what they're working on, what's on their mind, and just have the kind of discussions that you would have with your friends. The reason it won't work for most brands is that each post here takes up a huge amount of space. So it becomes very difficult to browse these communities, because if you're not interested in the first discussion, you can only see 3 or 4 of them before that's the end of the page. So that's why generally we like to have just the title of the discussion so it's easy to scan. The fourth type is what we call the cards and boxes approach. This is really common when Pinterest was launched a couple of years ago. It's less common now, but there are a couple of brands that do quite a good job of this, where the Lomography community, I think I got that name right, they have members that are uploading so many photos from around the world. So this works incredibly well if your community is based around something that's quite visual, something where people can easily share what they're doing, and it's the visual things that's most of interest to the members of that community. So this can work really, really well in a very, very narrow use case. So a few things to think about here. Again, I think all of us should be able to get to the level of level 3, which is making sure that the community is easy to read, aesthetically pleasing in design, static content is kept to a minimum, and it's easy to browse around the community and ideally avoid the stock photos. If you have to use them, you have to use them, but it's far better to have photos. If you do need to use them, have photos of members of that community. And if you want to go one beyond that, then make sure you're showing multiple types of community engagement activities on the homepage. There might be the images that they're sharing, the discussions they're participating in, anything, or the blogs that they've created as well. That's generally the highest level we want to get to here. The next side of this is the personalization. That's personalization with a S this time. I know I had a Z originally, or Z as you Americans would call it. So what we talk about by personalization is making sure that members get an experience that might not be personalized entirely to them, but at least has some recognition of their interest or the user groups or the subgroups within your community to which your members belong. So if we were to segment our members, and I believe every one of us should be doing this, if we segment our members by their activity, their tenure, or their psychographics, what we can then do is design a unique experience for them within that community. So this is an example for a client we worked with quite recently. They wanted something that was quite simple, that wasn't too complicated to use, even though you can do much more complicated versions than this, but a dead simple way of segmenting your members by the level of activity. So whether members have registered in the previous 30 days or not, whether they've visited that community since that registration, whether they've posted a reply or response within that time frame, whether they've contributed more than one post in the previous 30 days. So based upon the level of activity, we've designed a system that segments members into 5 different groups here. And now the magic is, based upon which of these 5 groups they're in, based upon whether they're inactive, whether they're a learner, or as some people call it, a lurker, whether they're a first-time contributor, whether they're an irregular, or whether they're a top contributor to that community, they get asked to do completely different things. The experience they have with that community is completely different. So if you're a long-term inactive, you might just get one message a year, because we don't want to spam you, one message a year about the very best content from that community. If you're a learner, if you're someone that visits that community at least once a month but doesn't participate, then you're going to get information that helps you read what's popular. You came there to read, and we're going to help you read. If you're a first-time contributor, then we want to take your enthusiasm for that community and design a unique journey and set of actions just for you. If you're an irregular, if you tend to participate a little bit but not too much, then we design a different journey for you as well. And if you're a top contributor, these are the people that we're asking to do the really big things, like share your story or lead a group or have a regular column within that community or create a blog post or start a debate. These are the members that we make the biggest asks of. So we're not asking members that don't participate to do things that they're not going to do. We're making sure that we're tailoring each specific email or digest or call to action that member receives to their level of participation. And the client that we designed this for had a 45% increase in participation almost the moment that we launched this system. So there are absolutely huge wins out there. You just have to customize it to different members. And this brings us back to a really important point. Certain groups of your members should have a different experience from one another. Your visitors should have a very different experience to your registered members of that community. They should have a different call to action in the first place. So for example, if we look at the Stack Overflow community, if you're not logged in, what you see on the left is the registration form in the banner of that page, which is quite rare and quite special to do. If you are logged in, you get the right-hand side. So it's a different experience based upon what we know about you at the moment. And this goes back into the calls to action we use as well. The most common calls to action at the moment, asking people to register or log in, search for information, or ask a question. So we want to be thinking about how we position these things within a community. If we look at the Tableau community again we see search on the left, we've come across this already, but on the right, if we're not logged in, we see a sign in or a place to create your account. Whereas if you remember from before, if you are logged in, there's a place for the people that are new to the community to get engaged. So it's 2 very clear calls to action here. Look at the Sonos online community. Again, we see a search box, and then we see a place where you can create a topic right there. I might make the login area or the register part a little bit clearer here, but generally this is what we want to be seeing. So the calls to action you use should vary by the member segment you're targeting. So when we began working with Eventbrite, their Event Tribe community they had, this is what the banner looked like for the homepage. I felt this was a bad banner to use. The contrast wasn't great. It didn't add anything to that community at all. So we looked at this and felt we can design a much better experience. So we designed this. If you're not logged in, you now get a very specific message. And that is, we tell you what the key value of that community is, which is to get ideas, get advice, get resources and connections to run successful events. And then we give you very specific steps for what we want you to do next. And when you complete each of these steps, it ticks it off. So this immediately looks a lot better. The contrast is a lot better. You can hide the banner if you don't want to see it. And just by adding this one banner had a 400% increase in the sign-up rate. That's just because of a banner. The banner is one of the lowest hanging fruits that we can possibly pick, and so few of us are doing it at the moment. So there's a huge win just in these tiny things. But this is only one level we want to get to, because once we had the visitor banner here, if you are a top member of that community, then it makes absolutely no sense to keep showing you the same things. So we use conditional logic within this banner to vary the ask we make of our members based upon what level of participation or what level of participation they've made in the past or how long they've been a member. So also the messaging change from welcome to Event Tribe to help other event professionals. Put your experience to great use in our community. And that messaging, by the way, came directly from the member surveys and interviews that we did. So it's things like sharing your best event promotion tip or telling us what resources would help you or what's the best event venue you've used. So we can change that banner depending upon what members have done, and if members don't like it, they can hide it at any particular time. And the results of things like this, just improving the technology in these simple ways, was significant, 160% increase in just this consultancy engagement alone. And you can also do a lot of other cool things with the banner as well. If reputation is important, you can move the banner into the very top part of that community, as we've done with our FeverBee experts community. You can show exactly where people are at the moment and what they want to move on to next. But the key thing is that we're developing unique onboarding journeys for each of our members. You shouldn't be sending members the same things. One of the other things you can also do is, based upon what platform you're using, is develop automation rules. So when members join, there's a certain set of automation rules that they go through. And then based upon this, we can guide people to the kinds of contributions we want them to make. And generally here, you should be able to get an open rate of between 35 to 50%. It will vary depending on the topic, but if members have just signed up, you should very easily be able to get good open rates at this level. So a couple of things to do here. 1, try to aim for that level 3 level. Try to make sure you have a specific area for newcomers to ask beginner level questions. Make sure you have calls to action guiding newcomers to what they need to do when they get started. And make sure that you have dynamic calls to action based upon where members have logged in or not. At the very minimum, I feel all of us should be able to do that. If you want to go beyond that, then you can start designing a unique user journey for each of your members based upon the length of time they've been a member of that community, based upon their past activity, or based upon whichever behaviors would make the most sense to you. And you can see a huge increase just as a result of these very small things. So we can do a much better job here than what we're doing at the moment. Next, we go to registration and onboarding. There is so many best practices here, which are constantly being ignored. Perhaps the most obvious one is what Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow do here. Having the registration form within the banner of that homepage so they don't even have to click anywhere else. That's powerful, that's impressive. But once you do that, the next process matters as well. So making sure you have an easy confirmation. There's not a lot of text here, there's no history of the community here. It's just you click this link and you're done. There's just 9 words here. That's pretty impressive. And then you get taken to the next page. And this is where the profile pages as well, I think there's an opportunity to do a lot of this a lot better. Stack Overflow, again, do a pretty good job of this. There's very simple copy to get started. You can drag and drop your photo into the right place. You can highlight exactly what you're interested in. You don't have to write one of those really dull about me fields. By the way, no one in a community ever wants to write an about me, but they will answer questions about themselves. What should we call you is a pretty good way of describing the question, a few standard features that people are interested in. That's all the information you need. Asking people to complete a lot of quantitative information at this side doesn't really make sense. And making sure all the fields are optional as well, that's pretty powerful as well. And you also notice the opt-in at the bottom as well. And then you get a welcome message from Stack Overflow. And this is a pretty simple way of doing it. You can see you get a quick summary tour. You can learn how to ask better questions, and you can create custom views based on the tech you like. You can design the community the way you like. I even think there's an opportunity here based upon the tags that people have selected in the latest activity to guide them towards participating in the right kind of activity. And it's also interesting here that this welcome email is triggered by participation in that community, and they tell you that at the bottom. I really like that. Generally, a tutorial for newcomers isn't a good idea unless your technology is quite complicated, and generally the time is better spent making that technology less complicated to use. But if you are going to do it, make sure it's simple. Make sure you got images that show exactly what's going on. Stack Overflow has a few custom things, but generally here I would recommend teaching people about the topic rather than teaching about the community. But this is a pretty good way of going about it, keeping it clean, keeping it efficient, no weird stuff here at all. So this is a pretty good process to be looking at. Next, we have member profiles. Member profiles are one of the most misunderstood things about a community, and most of the time they're getting ignored. So what tends to happen far too often is when people sign up for a community, they are dropped into a profile that looks like this. It looks ugly, it looks dead. I'm a gray image on a gray background. It just looks really, really dull and empty. But when it's actually complete, it looks okay. It looks pretty good. You can get the basics and who that member is. The challenge is getting people to complete their profile information. And most people will never do it until they become an active member. And the mistake that we make so often is trying to get people to fill out all these forms here, which they don't have an interest in doing until they want to impress the other people in that community. And then they'll naturally do it. So you don't have to spend more time getting people to complete their profile information. You have to spend more time getting them to a place where they want to impress the other people with their profile information. And then they'll do it by themselves. And that means participating, building a reputation within that community. Those are the levels that will help get a member to this kind of stage within that community. One of the best things, or a different approach I've seen, was from the Stack Overflow community as well. And I use them as an example so often because I think they're such a well-designed community, where they have a developer story where you can highlight the same information you completed originally, but then what they have is they create a timeline just for you that's about your part and your history, so you can show what you've done, what skills you picked up, what you're interested in. There is absolutely no reason this can't be applied to many of the different online communities that are out there today. If any of the vendors are watching this at the moment, I think this is a really good and a really simple, quick win that most people can apply. And it doesn't just have to be about work. It can be how they became interested in the topic, their biggest successes in that topic. It can be so many different things. I think there's a really big and really easy win here. Next, and now we're going through these quite quickly. Asking a question. It amazes me how often we make it difficult to ask a question in a community. But the real win here is making it easy to find the answer without having to ask a question in the first place. It's rather unlikely that a member is asking a question for the first time. Most of the questions have come up before and most of the questions have been answered before. And your challenge is more to guide members towards those answers. So if we look at the Apple support community here, what you notice as you begin to type in the question, it shows you the answer. I personally think the discussion should be above the communities, and I personally think it should show you if it has an accepted solution or not. But generally you can see, as you begin typing in the question, it shows you the previous answers as well. Getting people an answer without having to ask a question is a huge win for most communities that are out there at the moment. Stack Overflow naturally does a good job of this, where you're not just taking to the discussion that is relevant to the search term, but you can see the answers within that discussion as well. So it's really easy. It's a really quick way of finding the answer. But if people do have to ask a question, then generally what you want to be doing is reducing the options required to ask a question. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have a lot of different things that people have to go through to ask a question. So I like the Apple online community here. It's quite clean, it's quite simple, and it simply tells you what you have to do. I like the clean interface. And what you can also see is a very simple and quick link there, which is how to write a good question. Personally, I think this is a lot better appearing alongside the question, so people do click on it. But it's a fantastic way for people that are posting for the very first time in that community to figure out exactly how to make sure they're asking the question that is really going to get them a great answer. The other challenge is making it really easy for members to categorize their questions. If you've been running a large online community, you generally know that members are horrifically bad at categorizing their questions within that community. So we need to help them do a better job, or we're going to be doing that job ourselves until the end of time. So the Airbnb community is one option where at the bottom you can add tags that you think are relevant to your question. The problem with that is that most members aren't familiar enough with the terminology or just too lazy to do it. So you often get either hundreds of slightly different tags, or you get members not using tags at all. Or in the worst case scenario, if you force people to do this, then they're not going to ask a question at all. A slightly better option is the suggested tags, where based upon the text that people have included within their question, it suggests the tags that are most relevant to you. So the Stack Overflow is a pretty good example of doing this well. What I like even better is the Apple community, where they give you a couple of boxes and you just select the categories that are relevant to you. Most communities have a drop down here, so you have to scroll through and find the one you like. I think this is much better. I think this is a much better way of doing it. And what you also notice in the Apple community is that it uses the information that they know about you to add the specific relevant or the contextual information to that community. This is important because in a lot of technical communities especially, most of the first responses are, can you provide us with more information? So if you can get more information in the first place and make it easier to get that information, then there's a huge win here. So you can have great profile integration with most community platforms at the moment, and ideally include that within the community, within the question, so people have the context of what you're asking about as well. What we've also touched upon as well is asking or nudging members to ask better questions in the first place. When you're just starting out, you generally want to make it as easy as possible for members to ask a question. However, when your community has been around for a while, what you want to do instead is make it a little bit more difficult for members to ask a question to make sure you're not having hundreds of the same question being asked again and again. So if you want to ask a question in the Stack Overflow community, you first have to go to this page, which takes you through all the tips that you have to go through. And there's a search box here as well, so you can even search for that question here. And then you have to tick the small box at the bottom, and I think that's deliberate, saying that you're keeping these tips in mind. So this is a pretty good best practice here. I quite like this. And then as you begin asking the question, it shows you tips alongside, saying specifically what information you need to include and what you need to do to make sure your question is as good as it can possibly be. So the formatting is clear advice for formatting the question. And you can see as well, if there's an error, like if you're trying to include code, it tells you exactly what you can and can't do. So again, things like this are a huge win and really don't take too much time to do. There's no reason why every vendor doesn't have something like this enabled within their community at the moment. It's a pretty good best practice. Next is mobile. We're almost at the end here, about another 12 slides to go. So thank you for sticking with me this far. Mobile. Mobile in many communities either gets too much attention or too little. And this depends very much about how much traffic you're getting from mobile in the first place. With our clients, it's ranged between 20 to 90% of traffic. And it's also interesting how much it's kind of leveled off over the past couple of years or so. Since around the beginning of 2017, I think the number of visitors from mobile, at least in Western nations with high levels of mobile penetration at the moment, probably isn't going to be changing too much from what it is at the moment. But you can see it's risen a lot. So you should base your current your strategy and how much attention you give to mobile to how many or what percentage of your visits come from mobile today. So in the example at the top, that's probably a huge one. In the example of the middle, it's significant, but you don't want to spend too much time on it. Then at the bottom right, you're like, well, we're going to spend a little bit of time on it, but it's not their priority for us. And you want to be thinking about this in different terms. If you're getting a lot of traffic from mobile, then everything has to be amazing. One of the things I didn't like about the SAP community, when you visited that community, you notice how much space they're wasting. If a member is on the train or just has 20 minutes to kill before they do whatever they're doing next, they don't want to be spending that time scrolling through your community. The big welcome at the top of the page, the blank space, that's 1/3 of the image. You don't generally want to be doing this. So responsive design matters, and the design of that community on the mobile site matters a lot. Remember that members can be doing anything at that time. So you're competing against every interesting thing on the internet. So you have to do a lot better job than this. What you can also consider doing is developing a mobile app. This is the Figure 1 community. A mobile app can work quite well, but it has some unique challenges as well. One of the biggest challenges of a mobile app is that it's not easy to design, and it's hard to reach the critical mass for it. But if you are going to do it, it's usually good for images, it's usually good for swiping. It's good if you can swipe from one discussion to the next, whether you want to participate. It's good for voting, it's good for quick responses. Don't try to replicate your community, your entire community on the app. Make sure you're creating an app that has unique value for a specific situation where members don't have much time or attention. The Drive Tribe online community is a pretty good example of this, so you might want to check out what they do. But you can see these are two images side by side. You can see it's very easy to browse around and find what's relevant to you and make very simple, very quick contributions to that community. So again, if you're going to go down this road, at the very least, make sure you're featuring the latest activity at the top of the page, just the discussions. If you're going to develop a unique mobile app, then use the things that mobiles are terrific for, being location aware, being able to swipe, being able to quickly vote or share images. These are the kinds of things that add value to the community and don't just provide a worse experience to your community for more money for you. Okay, that was a lot of different tips today, and I'm hoping that a lot of it was useful to you. What you can do at this stage is benchmark your community today, so look at the link beneath this video, and develop your roadmap, your technology roadmap, because your technology is never done. You're always going to be working on your community, but develop your technology roadmap as a result. So if we benchmark a community and we see that this level here, then we're not going to try and get them to level 3 or 4 within the next 6 months, but we do want to be moving them up a level in each of these within 6 to 9 months. That's a reasonable roadmap to work on. And it never ends. You're going to keep working on this indefinitely because technology is always updating. It's like your house. You can't just leave your house the way it is. You always have to be upgrading your house and fixing things up and improving things and making sure it's in line with the latest design trends and social needs of whoever is living in that house. So it's very much the same. It doesn't end, but you need a technology roadmap in place because otherwise you're not getting anywhere near the value of that technology that you should be getting. We've worked with a lot of communities on their design. I don't want to do a hard pitch for you folks, but if you do want help designing your community, if you do want to making sure that you have the best community you possibly can, then you might want to reach out to us. Or even if you don't, if you just want more resources like this, then you can go to FeverBee.com, and we have a lot of free resources here. So I really, really hope that this is being useful to you. And if you have any questions, anything that you want to ask or any help you need, then you can contact me at the Rich Millington on Twitter or richard@feverbee.com. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it useful, and hopefully I'll hear from some of you soon or just be in touch. Thanks a lot, everyone. Goodbye.